Hello and welcome. This is Jen T. Grace. I'm the founder of Publish Your Purpose and the Institute for Author Growth and Impact. And I'm here today to celebrate you, Susan, in your book launch. And I am so excited for your book to come out. First, before we get into anything, how are you feeling about it being, the book is here?
Oh, I'm pretty excited. Yesterday was like official pub day, so I got lots of messages, lots of people telling me they ordered my book. It was really rewarding. It was a very rewarding day. A lot of really positive feedback. So excited. I'm excited.
Yeah, and I love when the timing kind of works out really well, where like the book literally just launched and we're able to have the conversation the following day, because sometimes there's a little bit of a delay. Okay, so the book is called Paused, Redefining Identity When Our Story No Longer Holds Us. And obviously I'm partial, but I think your cover in your book came out fantastic. So can we just share a little bit of like just your background before we kind of like unpack the book a bit?
Sure. So I spent almost 40 years working in human resources. I started in that career just out of college and continued in that career till just a few years ago. And I grew up in the greater Boston area and spent most of my life there. I've lived in Maine for the last few years, but most of my life I lived and worked and raised our daughter in the greater Boston area. And a few years ago, I left my corporate career and I took a very disciplined break for the first year, just to not sort of find myself jumping back into something that I may or may not want to do. So I took some real time off to think about what I wanted to do. And I found myself gravitating towards writing. I finished my dissertation about 10 years ago. And at the time I really wanted to turn that into some kind of a book, but it wasn't the right time. It had been 6 really long years and I was still working full time. There's a lot of things going on at the time. Mm-hmm. So writing was always an interest of mine, but I didn't necessarily see myself becoming a full-time writer. And then it just sort of gradually evolved. I started writing on Substack. I got some good traction, and then I expanded that to do some speaking and advocacy work. And then that sort of led me to think, well, how do I make this a cohesive story? And it became the book. So it's been a great couple of years working sort of specifically on this story, and bringing it out, working with you and your team has been fantastic.
Yeah, thank you for saying that. I feel like working with you has been just it feels effortless, which is not always the case. So I appreciate the kind of the intentionality that you bring to the table. It makes the process a lot smoother. And so the book is called Paused. Can we first just kind of start with why paused, and then again, redefining identity when our story no longer holds us? So can we just elaborate on that a little?
Yeah, so the book is a memoir through the lens of identity theory. So I wanted to, I have found, and you'll see this in the book, I have found that theoretical frameworks really help to understand like what's happening with yourself and in the world. And I obviously picked that habit up through my doctoral studies, but identity theory is very broad. And I studied it back in my program, but when I started to think about my story, what I was writing about, I wanted to help people understand like what was going on beneath that, right? So I could tell a story of an identity crisis, which my first real reckoning with an identity crisis was menopause. So the title is deliberately a play on that experience, but that's not what the book is about. But that was my first real identity reckoning. You sort of think about your identity in terms of who am I, how did I get here, and where am I going? And by 12, 13, adolescence, a lot of us have sort of written that story for ourselves. You know, I'm going to go to high school, then I'm going to go to college, and I'm going to get a job, then I'm going to get married and have kids, whatever your particular story is. And you write your story and then you live it. And that's sort of who you are and and part of that story is where you're going as well as where you came from, right? So it's that 3-legged stool of the sort of core of identity theory. So you go along, and then all of a sudden you face like an identity crisis. And in my case, it was undiagnosed early menopause when I was only 42. which was more than 20 years ago. I had been going along very successfully in my career. I had reached the C-level. I was the chief people officer at a division of a Fortune 500 financial technology company. And I sort of envisioned myself continuing down that path. And all of a sudden, I had severe onset perimenopause, which went undiagnosed for a really long time, but I didn't know that was what was happening. And all of a sudden my performance started slipping and everything started unraveling. My career unraveled, my health unraveled, and that story no longer held me. And I didn't know what to do about that. So I abruptly resigned because I thought, well, I need to save myself. No one's coming to save me. And I didn't want to find my performance degrading so much that I was terminated. My marriage had been on life support. So I had all these things I was facing, and I was like, okay, I need to take a step out. So I took a step out, not really having a plan. And then I had a further crisis, and my identity like completely unraveled. And it took me years to build it, to find my way back, or really, I want to be really clear about that, to find my way forward. I spent the first couple of years trying to go back. And that's one of the things I learned and write about in this book that I hope people find resonance with, is there's really no going back, right? You think you can go back. And that's what keeps a lot of us stuck, right? I went off path with my career, and then I thought, well, all I have to do is get back on that path. But so many other things had happened during that hiatus that there wasn't going back. I had to really rewrite my story, and I had to relook at those pillars of identity and say, okay, who am I now versus who was I as an adolescent? How did I get here? Unemployed, etc. And now what am I going to do to go forward? So there's lots of different lenses of which we can look at identity, but that's how I tell the story, starting with the initial reckoning with identity crisis, which is also for many is an opportunity, and it eventually turned into an opportunity for me, but I had to find my way there. So I think, uncovering the different ways that we can understand identity, how we see ourselves, how others see us. We often identify that as a core part of our identity, as well as a story. So there's lots of different ways to look at it. So I hope in this story that readers will find resonance with one of these ways of thinking about it, and one of these ways of thinking, oh, this exploration of who I am or who I want to be in this chapter is actually part of reconstructing my identity and rewriting my story.
And so if someone's reading this, then this is, chronicling your lived experience and what a tumultuous time it was. And is there something that you would say to someone who might be in that, maybe they're not at that kind of tipping point of the reckoning, but they're like, they know that the reckoning is coming. Like if you had to go back and tell, or if you could go back and tell your past self, like, try this, or what about this, or just kind of like some reframe, what do you think that might be?
I think that that openness to rewriting our story, so not hanging on to understanding that that's what the process was, that we wrote that story and then we lived into it. And there's all sorts of reasons why we might write that story, right? And I talk about this in sort of my own childhood. So going back to, well, why was my professional identity so important to me? Why was that the thing that defined me, the thing that when I no longer had it, I didn't feel like I had any identity. So, starting before I locked in on my identity at 12 and said, okay, I'm going to work my butt off in school. I'm going to get the best grades. I'm going to go to college, and then I'm going to have a career. Like, why did I lock in on that story, right? Other people lock in on different stories. Other people lock in on, I'm going to get married and have 5 kids and happily ever after in a big house in the suburbs, or like whatever that story is you lock in on. I want to answer your question though. So then when that story gets disrupted, some people don't understand that they have the agency to rewrite the story, right? So whether it's divorce, Jen, or career, like losing your job unexpectedly, or in my case, my reckoning being first off with menopause, illness, there's a lot of empty nest. There's a lot of things that, like those are how we define our identity. And then when they're no longer part of our story, we find ourselves stuck, and because we're trying to go back, or we don't realize that we have the agency to rewrite the story and to try out possibilities and then discard them. I think that we don't have like a big comfort with like, oh, well, I mean, I went down the PhD path in my late 40s because that was like part of my trying to discover how I was going to rewrite my identity. But I wasn't like, I didn't have to do it. I ended up doing it, but it wasn't like, it was like, I tried that on. I was like, oh, this fits. I like this. This is going to be something I continue. I also tried teaching Pilates. I didn't really like that. I love Pilates, but I didn't love teaching it. So I discarded it. So I want people to see, so that would be my advice. Like, don't get stuck in your own head, in your own story, and don't think that anything has to be or is permanent. And try it. If you don't like it, it's something you don't, then discard it as part of your identity. Like, we have much more agency in our identity than we think we have sometimes. It's like, oh, well, that's just the way it is. That's just how I am. I've been this way since I was 12. I've been this way since I was born. It's like, yes. And we have an opportunity every day, every moment to rewrite that story and live a different story if we want to. And why I wanted to extend it beyond menopause, and you and I have had several conversations about this, menopause can be very narrow, and a lot of the literature around it right now are more like popular literature, not so much the research literature, is more like, it's like loss or liberation. It's like two ends of a continuum, and there's like a whole bunch in between. And I wanted to sort of normalize that for people as well, in terms of it doesn't have to be an either or. So I think specifically back to answer your question is like agency in writing your own story and recognizing how you created the story in the first place and how you might recreate it for your next chapter, your next 5 years, your next 10 years, your next forever. It just sort of, you have the opportunity to change it at any time.
Yeah. And I love what you're saying of kind of like going back to the origin of the story in the first place. Cause I don't know that I've ever thought about that, right? Like going back to when you're, in middle school or younger and making that declaration that I'm putting all my eggs in a basket of having a successful career versus a successful family or being creative or whatever the things may be. So yeah, that's interesting because like that really is a reckoning, because now you have to like go back and see like, okay, where was that thought originally formed? Where's the root of that identity? And now it's like looking, okay, now it's been 40 years. How do I unravel that to then make space for new? Because at least neuroplasticity works for us regardless of age, right? So like at least we can kind of rewire the pathways in our brain to take on a new identity. But I feel like it just seems like such an effort to unpack.
Right. Well, you have to let go of, what you've been holding on to, right? Like, and it's so unconscious a lot of times, right? I mean, a lot of this I knew, but I couldn't really articulate it until I started writing the book, right? Why was I so self-reliant by 12? Was it, I thought it was because I was a middle child. I dismissed it as the fact that I was a middle child, and like we're very close in age, the three of us. But really, my parents were fairly neglectful, like not in a harmful, like not in a abusive way. But I write about childhood emotional neglect, and it's like sort of what you don't see versus what you do see. So I became self-reliant because I really didn't have a choice. Now, I suppose I could have competed for attention with my younger sister, who was the needier one, but it was easier for me, and whatever my sort of DNA was, it was easier for me to just take care of myself. And because my sister is 16 months younger than me, that was easy. That made my parents' life much easier, right? So like, I'm very careful to say, even though like from a theoretical perspective, it was neglect, it wasn't abuse, and those are different. But I always just thought I was a middle child. I was very independent. I liked school. I liked getting good grades. That gave me sort of a sense of accomplishment. But really, it was like, when you read the chapter, you'll be like, oh, I mean, I really wasn't paid. I didn't really pay much attention. I sort of raised myself in many ways, but there was like a lot of benefit to growing up in a big Italian Irish Catholic family that, you know, my parents, I was sort of raised by the village, if you will.
And even that, I feel like there's kind of like that splitting point, right? Because even having, you know, like neglect, even if it's not abuse, like just kind of like, you just got to figure it out on your own. There's still probably people who might have pursued family, creativity over career, even in that same scenario. So it's so fascinating to think of just kind of like how we're wired. And I think about, like, for me, I love talking about what people do, like even in personal settings. And I find that most people don't want to talk about their job. They don't, especially people who are like employed in jobs, people who own a business or, you know, or consulting or speaking and things like that. They will talk about what they do for days. But people who are just kind of like in some kind of role where they're working for someone else rarely actually want to talk about that. And for me, that's like the thing that I find so fascinating, so interesting about people's day-to-day lives. And it was a few years ago where I realized, I'm like, oh, wow, like, yeah, people don't really want to talk about their work when they're not at work. And so like, even just and thinking like, how, like, where did that wiring come from in my case? Like, why has that always been of interest? I don't have an answer to that, but now I can ponder it.
Yes, for sure. For sure. And like I said, and part of my intent was to not only for you to ponder it, but to give you some frameworks to which to ponder it in if you're interested in that. Like, some people will just, I suspect that some people are going to read the book just because they want to hear like my story and how it ended. They might have read or started in, like, you know, I start with the menopause, which I've written quite a lot about in Substack, and I also speak about. But then there's a lot like, how did I get there in the first place? And then where did it go from there, right? So some people, I think, will just read it for the story. And some people might skip ahead and want to read the chapter that's all on theory, which is towards the end of the book, which frankly, if you're only interested in the story, you don't have to read the chapter on theory. So I wanted to sort of offer both of those things. I don't know, it just came, that's how it came to me to write a book, you know, not just the story, but the combination of tools or frameworks for people to say, oh, that's why maybe I'm wired this way, or and maybe I can rethink that. And again, this isn't like a self-help book. This isn't everybody should rethink anything. It's not that at all. But if you so choose, or if you find yourself stuck, it could be really helpful from that perspective.
Yeah. And you had said before we went live that your husband had said to you that it was kind of like an unexpected, you know, kind of like a surprise that you had included the theory in this. What do you think, like, what do you think the cause of that, the surprise was for that?
I think because it's sort of woven into the story, and sort of supports, like, so he knows most of the story. We've been married almost 30 years. So he knows most of the story that I wrote about historically, and from the time, certainly we were married about 8 years, I think, when I had my menopause breakdown. So he certainly knows from that point forward. So he found it interesting to anchor the story in to say, oh, that's why that. And some of that he knew and some of that he didn't. And also is someone, he's a sort of he's committed to continually learning. He's not book, but he's not a book learner. So like learning about theory, like learning about identity theory, and then being able to ask himself some questions, right? Who am I? How did I get here? Because he's still, you know, he's like on his third career, and he's 5 years older than me, and like, am I just going to keep working forever? Like, that's his story, you know? So anyway, so the combination of the anchoring of my story and the tools for him to sort of think about his own identity and how he got here, and where he might go for his next chapter.
I love that so much. What in terms of the who, right? Because we're kind of talking about like identity applies to everybody. So I'm curious, like when you were writing this, like who was like the person or group of people that you were like, this is going to have the biggest transformation or the biggest benefit for?
You know, it's interesting. As at first, I thought I was writing to mid-career women because that's sort of where I've been writing. A lot of my Substack sort of focuses on that. But as I started expanding that into whether it be trauma that causes an identity rupture or just a change in life, like a divorce or a illness, like I thought there's all these, anybody can relate to that, almost anybody who's curious about identity, either again from the lens of why is this my identity? Why do I so strongly identify as X versus, where am I had to retire. I'll give you a few examples that might be helpful. I had to retire suddenly, not me, this is a person I was talking to. I had to retire suddenly because I was diagnosed with an illness that was preventing me from doing my job successfully. No plans to retire at that age, youngish, planned on working another 10 years, feels very stuck now, right? Doesn't feel like he could do what he felt like he was meant to do. So I think there will be some resonance in some of my story for someone like that. So someone who's stuck from a career perspective, they had a health issue that's preventing them from continuing in their career. Now what do they do at late 50s, right? With our life expectancy increasing the way it has too, right? We're living a lot longer. So that last couple decades matter as much in our identity as our early life did. And I don't think it gets enough attention right now. Like I feel like the lost years, like, my mother who's been gone 10 years would say, I'm old, but I'm not stupid. And like, people don't pay attention to you. Like when you get past a certain age and like you become really invisible. So I feel like this, having agency around our identity, no matter what our age or our circumstances are, will maybe give people some tools to be like, oh, I can really rethink this. And nothing has to be forever. I can start a PhD program, and if I don't like it, I don't have to finish it. And as a young person, I never thought that way. Everything I started, I had to finish. So I feel like it's a pretty broad audience of like. It could be, my daughter's 27. I'm not sure it's going to be that relevant to her age. Like, I feel like some life experience may be required, to like be able to like look forward and look back and and rewrite your own story if your current story no longer supports you.
So so as we're kind of winding down, if you were to wave a magic wand and whether it's 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, some period of time from now, and someone comes up to you on a street or bumps into you they haven't seen in a while and they read your book, what is the thing that you're hoping they will say that the book did for them?
To have like a deeper understanding of who they are and to know what to do if they face an identity rupture unexpectedly. That they can take the book back out and be like, oh, here's this framework or here's this framework. And I can rethink that. I can unstick myself. And there's lots of different ways you can unstick yourself. And I wouldn't suggest that I prescribe how people unstick themselves, but I think looking at the different ways that you can unstick yourself and build the life that you want to have for whatever chapter of life you're in, I think that's what I hope. I hope someone say, I was stuck, and it could be menopause, because my menopause story, as you know, is very relatable. And it's still happening today, 20 years later. So it could be that, but I also had some career disruption later. And of course I had a fire that was devastating. So like, there's all these different life disruptions. So I hope, people say, oh, I didn't really think about that as as an event that was disrupting my identity. I thought about it as a crisis or trauma, and then I filed it away. I didn't really think about how it changed my trajectory for good or for ill. So like that's also like an awareness. I guess that would be the second or third thing that I would hope is like, oh, it created an awareness around identity. Because again, not everybody's gonna either face these kind of ruptures or want to rewrite their story. They may want to hold on to their story and continue on that path if it serves them, or even if it doesn't serve them, until they learn that it's not serving them, right? So again, not prescriptive, not self-helpy, but just, opportunity to sort of explore differently.
I love all of this, and I can't wait to kind of dive into the fullness of the book, because obviously we've been working on this together for quite some time, and to me this is the best part of the process, when we can both be physically holding something that is a tangible result of all of your hard work and your effort. And I guess maybe my final question would be, if someone's watching this and they themselves are thinking that maybe they want to put their story down on paper, do you have one little piece of advice that you might share with them from your experience?
Be brave. I think that's the hardest thing, to like write the truth. Like you want to kind of make it seem a little nicer than it is. And certainly my story is mostly pretty nice, but like the brave, being honest and being like, this is what really happened, and is, I think, the hardest part that I found. Like you want to whitewash it a little bit, either because you don't want other people to feel bad, or you don't want to feel as bad as like in retrospect. Like, oh wow, that was pretty sad. But I think that the bravery gave me, being brave and starting with Substack and putting out little bits of the book. Not really, but indirectly. I didn't know I was doing that at the time, but it turns out I was doing that a little bit. It's like testing it. And then, the bravery and the honesty makes you relatable, because everybody has a story. They may not want to tell it. So I think being brave and realize, I never thought, not, am I fully a writer as in my identity? Not exactly, but I did write a book. So I'm working on like, my new identity now is like, I'm a writer. Like I'm not even really there yet. So I think the bravery and then the openness to how you can shape your own identity, and just, write every day. I know a lot of people say that, but it's hard to do. But I think it helps, even if it's not very good. It like gets you thinking.
Yeah, it's a good creative outlet for those that, don't mind writing. Some people just absolutely hate it, and that will never be a good path for them. But for those that is, I think just getting into a daily habit helps. So good. Thank you so much, Susan. So your website is susanmiele.com, so people can check you out there. You also have a really awesome Substack. Can you share the name of your Substack?
It's also susanmiele.com, but Substack first.
Perfect. Yes, I highly encourage people to check it out. I have your newsletter that comes to me monthly, and I appreciate your stories in it. And your book is available wherever books are sold. So wherever you are watching this and you would like to get your book, go for it. It's on all of the kind of the main places. Bookshop.org is the one that I will always promote, because they are a certified B Corp. They give back to the community. They have a huge kind of philanthropic component to what they do in regards to supporting local independent bookstores. So that is always my preference for you who are maybe watching, is to go check out bookshop.org and check out Susan's website, her Substack, and all of the things. And thank you so much, Susan. I'm so happy that we have crossed this finish line. This is incredible, and I really appreciate you.
Thank you.